Okay, we're going to be live in about 30 seconds. Very good. Here we go.
Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in it. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state and criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of...
We'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
First hour, here we go. Well, I had some intro music. I don't know what happened to it. I guess it didn't run in the cart. So that's okay. We have made some improvements at Revolution Radio. Things have been upgraded again at headquarters out west of the Rockies. And that was something got left off, I guess. It was the intro music, but that's okay. Just gives us more time together. Want to welcome everybody in the chat room to X Squared Radio. We're coming to you live through the America Free Radio studios, somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains. And we are broadcasting live through Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. Very easy to get to. Many ways, because we're also streaming to you live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook Live, and D Live. So all that's going out at the same time. All those venues have chat rooms, and I'm gathering all the chat rooms in one place right here, so I can see all of you, and you can write to me, and I will respond, and especially if you have bright ideas or you write it all caps, or especially at the bottom of the YouTube, there's a little rectangle called Top Chat, and you can put any amount of money you want in there, and I will highlight your idea and thank you publicly for your contribution. You can also do it in Facebook. You can send money through Facebook as well. It's very easy to do. So I want to welcome everyone. Sean McHenry, one of the first ones in tonight down there in Florida. Tony M, Rehab, Rough Draught, Overland Lad. Hey, that's cool. From Wales. That's very cool. I did a lot of driving in Wales. You have so many roundy rounds over there. Kind of driving on the left-hand side of the road is kind of weird, but no, I guess if you're sitting on the right side of the car. Eric, good to see you out there. And Freedom Bound, that's new in YouTube. Thank you so much for being there. Brandy Lou down there in Texas, thank you so much. Boom Chop on D Live. That is so cool. So cool. But I have pretty good intro music. He said, no need intro music. And I said, well, I like the intro music. I choose it. It kind of puts me in a mood. Puritan Pal, good to see you out there on Twitch. Excellent, excellent. We love to see people on Twitch. Let's see. Byron Hardwick. Oh, that's Big D 1955. I see. Okay, you put more there in your username. I like that very much. And Patty Larios, see you as well. Welcome, everyone. All right, we have a lot to go over, but it's going to be a little open-ended tonight because I thought about hardwiring this thing, and I know that this is really going to excite everybody. It's going to rouse your faculties. So all you people out there watching me might see me fumble for some things, but the thing is that we found ourselves in a weird predicament. We thought that all we really had to do was rally and support one another and ride and talk and vote, right? We just thought all we have to do is go to the ballot box, and that's what we did. I mean, 11 million more of us went than went in 2016, and we thought we have this quite handy. And I think we did, but it was evident a couple of days later that there were some shenanigans going on. We don't really know what it was. We want to call it cheating. We want to call it fraud. We don't really know what to call it, but with elections, especially presidential elections, winning is everything. Winning is everything. Once you've won, you have all the power. Now, I know you're saying, but wait, Trump won in 2016, but there was never a peaceful transition of power. The left began impeaching him the instant he took his hand off the Bible. It's true. It's true. That battle was going on, but say that if you want, winning had consequences, did it not? I mean, Trump wrestled the broken economy that Obama had handed him to the ground and converted it, pinned it to the ground, and turned around the entire world. The Make America First and the MAGA agenda not only saved America, but it was saving the world. Countries all over the world were feeling that energy. He had shifted the average reality. By getting the regulations off of us, getting the federal boot off of our neck, opening up our opportunities, not only in the inner cities where a lot of us live, but internationally, because things that we were selling to Canada were getting tariffed so bad that we couldn't be competitive. I mean, we were paying 200% tariffs going into Canada on some items. All those went away. And we were getting killed by ordinary manufacturing that was being done 40, 50, 60, 70% of the manufacturing being done in Mexico, and then just driving across the border without any duties or anything like that. So they were getting really cheap labor, and they were having access to capital that didn't have in the United States, and yet the goods were coming over and competing against us. And we were shipping jobs everywhere. We were shipping jobs to Morocco. We were shipping jobs to Vietnam. We were shipping jobs to Malaysia and everywhere. I mean, everywhere but here. And unemployment was high, and it looked like it was going to stay high. But once the MAGA agenda started biting in, everything changed. Once you got the regulations off the truckers, once you got the regulations off of small business and their access to marketing and their access to foreign markets, everything began to change, and it was changing in a hurry. So you see, winning has consequences. That's why the fascists, the global syndicate, I call them, had to win. They had to win at any cost, even if it meant whatever it is they did. Now, I said around Easter, I went back and tried to find the actual clip, and it takes a lot of listening to get through there, but I found the clip, and it basically says that I was talking about a nonprofit that was formed called Common Cause. Now, you can go look it up, commoncause.org, and you can look at their agenda. It's frightening. It's absolutely jaw-dropping frightening. Not as bad as the one I'm going to share with you tonight, but it was pretty frightening. Common Cause had, in addition to all the other fascist things that they represented, and the donations were off the chain. Just this organization was so powerful. But they had contracted with 15 states. And the reason I picked up on the article is because Colorado was the 15th state to sign on. And it was the agreement that they made with one another that they were going to withhold their electors until the national popular vote was known. And then those states had committed to aligning their electors with the national popular vote. Now, obviously, this is a really big problem because let's just take a state like, I don't know, let's take Arizona. We know that Trump wins Arizona by double digits, and he has a lot of followers out in Arizona. But let's just say Arizona, the state of Arizona, decided to vote for Donald Trump. Let's say it by a 10% margin, 10 points. And Arizona is going to hold back their electors until the national popular vote is known. Now, let's just say, hypothetically, that not Trump, forget about what candidate it is, just not Trump wins the popular vote. So Arizona is going to disenfranchise its voters in its state, according to its constitution. And they're going to pledge their electors with a national popular vote. 15 states had signed on to this. And yes, during that broadcast, I had said, now I believe it would not take 15 states. It would only take about 5 or 6 states to stop the election. All they would have to do is withhold their electors, 70 or so electors, and you could stop either candidate from reaching 270. Now, I said, if this happens, if you get to the point where neither candidate gets to 270, we have constitutional provisions for that. And one of those provisions is that the Congress will elect the president and the Senate will elect the vice president. And the other consequence of that is that as the states come forward, if the states have conflicting sets of electors, like we had happen, then what will happen, according to the Constitution, is it will be a joint session. Congress and the Senate comes together to hear the reading of the electors. And so the governor or the spokesperson for the state stands up and says, Georgia, pledges its 25 electors or its 15 electors for not Trump. But the state legislature can then stand up and say, well, yes, that's the certified set by the governor and the secretary of state. But according to our Constitution, it is the state legislature that assigns the electors, that slates the electors. And the legislature is proposing its electors be for Donald Trump. Because we believe that the popular vote in our state wasn't counted correctly. There was some kind of conflict. But in any case, the state legislature is going to go with Donald Trump. Now, that is what was happening. That's why we went to Washington on January 6th. We went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th to show our presence, to show our faith, to show our flag, to show our patriotism, so that this debate would take place in the light. It wouldn't take place in the back of a smoky room somewhere. And that's exactly what was happening. That debate was taking place. Arizona was on the floor of this joint session. They had two sets of electors, one for Donald Trump and one for Virtual Joe, and they were debating on which set of electors to accept. Now, the law is very clear. The Constitution is very clear. And that is that the state legislature takes priority. It's in the Constitution. Now, it's never been argued. It's never been decided on. It's never been challenged. That would have been a great thing to send to the Supreme Court for sure. But right in the middle of this debate, on the floor in the Congress, in the joint session, Antifa and BLM broke into the building. And they were the ones that were causing the mayhem. Now, there were a lot of Trump followers that went in too because they were invited in. They opened the gates. They stayed within the velvet ropes. They came in. They looked around. They were taking pictures. They didn't hurt a fly. Of course, one of them got killed, which was Ashley Babbitt. And I reported that day on Inside Edition. They interviewed me, and I said, look, this is terrible. This woman was killed in cold blood. She was totally unarmed. Now we know who did the murdering, but we'll see if charges are brought on that. But let me get to the point. The point is that 6 months before the election, I predicted that 5 or 6 states would stop the count, that they would disrupt the process, and that it would probably go to a debate on the floor, which it did. What I did not know is the extent to which the global syndicate would go to disrupt that process. Because once they put everybody in the little room, in the safe room, and struck fear in everybody, when they came out with a mission. And that mission was to seat the electors for Virtual Joe. There was no more sympathy for Donald Trump at that point. So they won. By what means? Maybe history will tell. Maybe it won't. Maybe they'll succeed. Some of the things I'm going to cover tonight might shed doubt for you on this. But what I really want to do is make sure that we get through this program tonight with hope. That we get through this program knowing that America is not lost. The Republic is not lost. I don't mean that everything's going to reverse. I don't mean that all of a sudden they're going to decide, hey, we made a terrible mistake. That doesn't happen. That's not going to happen. Virtual Joe is going to serve out his 2 years. Oh, no. I didn't slip up. I didn't say 2 terms. I said 2 years. Virtual Joe, and you're hearing it first right here on America Free Radio, Virtual Joe will be gone at the end of 2 years. By the time February 2023 rolls around, 2 years from inauguration, Virtual Joe will be gone. He will retire. He will be in a hospital bed. Somehow, some way, by natural causes, he is not going to be in office anymore. I know you're going, wow, can we make it that far? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And Cherokee Drifter, good to see you out there on YouTube. He says, hello, Brooks, from across the mountains to your west. Very good, very good. And Hollow Earth guys out there as well. Oh, yes, proper terms for the C-lection are theft and treason. I get you. But, that's going to take a Department of Justice. That's going to take something in the cabinet to work against Virtual Joe, and I don't think that's going to happen. By the way, Wayne Allen Root, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a columnist. He is popular. I've known him for a number of years. And when I read his column today, he said, this is the most important column I've ever written. And, I thought that Joe was president and he's not. And we were going, what? What do you mean he's not president? He said, nope, Joe Biden is not president. It's Obama. Obama's running everything. He's pulling all the strings from behind. And I wrote him back. I said, Wayne, you're wrong. Obama was a puppet. Obama was a bumbling idiot without a teleprompter. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know how to do anything. He does what he is told. And who tells him to do it? The Global Syndicate. The think tanks of the Global Syndicate are the ones that write all these executive orders. They're the ones that write these omnibus bills It's not Congress. Congress didn't write the Affordable Care Act. Congress didn't write any of the executive orders that Virtual Joe signed in the first month he was in office. Those were all written by global syndicate think tanks, most of which are funded by the CCP. But there's another nonprofit you need to worry about, and that is called, I think it's called, what was it, Mona? I think Mona's out there. It was TrumpVoterList.org or something like that. I think that was it. I looked it up. Wow. I mean, wow. This is an organization that is encouraging people to turn in their neighbors if they suspect them of being Trump voters. Yeah. And they're going to collect all the names and addresses of the Trump voters, and they're being classified as domestic terrorists. And then the names, the list of names is going to be turned over to the Justice Department, the public officials, and eventually published to the public. These are the Trump voters turned in by their own friends, their own family, their own neighbors. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? It sounds a little bit like what Gina Carano was saying on, the woman that used to play on The Mandalorian and got kicked off for saying this. Well, she was right. This nonprofit is out there, and they're well funded, and it's very chilling. So people want to know right now, because we've been led down this path a little bit now, haven't we? Not that the executive orders are really taking effect yet. They've written them, they've signed them, but they're not really kicking in yet. The only thing that's really stopped is pulling the permit on an XL pipeline. And still, Arkansas and Texas are suing, so it's only a matter of time before that gets started back up. The point is that these are all getting tied up in court. These are all getting resisted. States are passing laws which are writs of nullification. That is to say, we have our state law, we have our state constitution, and your federal law is not going to apply in our state. If we determine that law to be unconstitutional, you're not going to enforce it in our state. And if you try, we're going to put you in jail. Missouri is one of them, Tennessee's another. There are other states that are nullifying these federal actions. So it's not all victory. Not all victory. But people want to know, where are they taking us? Where are they leading us? Where is this path going of the global syndicate? Well, John Kennedy, not John F. Kennedy, but John Kennedy, he's a Republican from Louisiana. Today, he absolutely unloaded the RPGs on the Democrats' proposed $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. Sounds good, doesn't it? A COVID relief package. Why? That just makes so much sense right now, right? It's just COVID, 500,000 people, right? I mean, all causes of death have been kind of rolled up into one, and now it's all called COVID, right? Well, Mr. Kennedy, Congressman Kennedy, noted the package that is supposed to provide assistance during the coronavirus pandemic is not really geared for that. It is chock full of what he calls spending porn. He called the bill a neosocialist wish list because it includes money for transit projects, illegal immigrants, and more having nothing to do with the virus. I quote, "The profligacy is mind-numbing. The motto of the Biden administration seems to be, we can't spend too much. Any fair-minded person knows that this is a very superficial, desultory, almost infantile approach. Either that or the people advising President Biden have an opium habit. Any fool can spend money. The object is not to spend money. It is not how much you spend. It's what you spend it on. 95% of President Biden's bill is not going to even be spent until 2022 and beyond. This isn't a coronavirus bill. This is a left of Lenin neo-socialist wish list. I mean, it just is, he says. It is chock full of spending porn. They've got money for transit projects, bridges, language preservation. Billions for people who are in our country illegally. I'm all for spending additional monies to combat the coronavirus, but this bill isn't it, close quote. Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent, right, I'm winking here for those of you on audio only, the independent from Vermont, stated that there will be legislation on the need to transform our energy system to create millions of good-paying jobs. Of course, they'll all be federal jobs, right? They'll be federal government jobs. Combating climate change. And, we're going to mount the army against that. That's all weapons are going to be aimed at the climate. Go get them, boys. Kick that climate's ass. And rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Yeah, that's good. And that the message to Republicans on infrastructure and healthcare is that if you are not prepared to come on board, we're going to go forward and we're going to do it alone. I suppose a border wall doesn't count as infrastructure. I mean, just saying, probably wouldn't count as infrastructure. To them, wrong kind of infrastructure. He said, I've been talking about the reconciliation package. Reconciliation is kind of a sideways way of getting things passed. You don't have to go into filibuster. You don't have to debate. You just do it on reconciliation. That's number one, dealing with the emergencies that working families face now. Not like you, Bernie. You had a ghostwriter write a book, put your name on it. Some corporation bought 25,000 copies of that book, and you pocketed the money. That's not the way it's normally done, Bernie. Not like working families face now. And we hope to have that on the floor next week. But there's another bill coming down which will deal with the need to transform our energy system, create millions of good-paying jobs, combating climate change, and rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. We've got some 10% of our workforce today is unemployed. We've got to put people back to work at good wages, and that's a good way to do that. I see. Not like, market demand or anything like that. We're just going to create jobs. Okay, you have a job. You get paid on Friday. Go to work. It doesn't matter. Got a job. He also stated, I think what you're seeing right now is we are reaching out to Republicans and saying, look, if you want to rebuild our infrastructure, come on board. You want to lower the cost on prescription drugs? You want to provide health care to all people? You want to raise the minimum wage in this country? We'd love to have you. But if you are not prepared to come on board, we're going to go forward and we're going to do it alone. We've got 50 votes plus the vice president. We can do it in the Senate. We've got the votes in the House, and that's what we intend to do. So you see what's happening, right? They've split the country. And the worst part about splitting a country is it's sort of majority rule. In other words, the people that are the 49.5 percenters, they don't exist. They're not accommodated. And I have to tell you, every single revolution in history, every single revolt was caused like this. Half the country or more is obfuscated by a ruling elite. People are only going to take that so long, and then they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to secede, and they're going to say, we're not paying you anything anymore. We're not sending you any taxes, and you're not welcome on our property. They're going to put up a fence, change the gauge of their railroad, and that's the end of that. You're going to have to go to war to bring them back. And the last time we did that, 1 million Americans died. 1 million Americans, all Americans died. We don't want to do that again. So how are they accomplishing this? How are they getting away with it? because I don't really think they have the majority. They think they have a majority, but I don't think they have the majority. And James Bright, you're exactly right on D-Live. He says the mind screwing is real. And Rehab, be careful what you say. He said we should all stop paying taxes. Maybe not stop paying them, but you could delay it a little bit. You know, you starve them out for a couple months and they get kind of mean. What is it? Hollowworth guy says, new EO from Biden file will make immigrants not have to take a background check or oath. SMH. Yeah. Well, or learn English. Whatever. 2 Republican commissioners, I don't know if you know the way the FCC works. The FCC has 5 commissioners. One of them is the chair, and then there's 2 commissioners from one party and 2 commissioners from the other party. And the chair of the FCC is chosen in alignment with the majority party in Congress. So that would mean that the FCC chairman right now is a Democrat. So you have 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats, okay? And the last time we had this situation, we almost had what was going to be a federal takeover of the internet. They were going to change the way the internet was classified by the federal government. It had started off what we call a light hand, which basically means the federal government doesn't really get involved with what people do on the airwaves. They control the airwaves, but they don't control what goes on the airwaves in this, like, Section 230. What they were going to do is they were going to change the internet so that it became a utility. And a lot of people were for this because they didn't understand what it would do, this net neutrality thing. Net neutrality was a very deceptive name. What it meant was exactly the opposite of what it was named. Net neutrality led people to believe, falsely, that everyone would be paying the same rate, that the rich and the poor and the speeds and everything would be the same. That's not true. That's not true. It costs a lot of money to have high bandwidth because of the equipment, the antennas, the computers, all that stuff. And so people are willing to pay for that premium. And so they get that premium service, like Netflix and companies that are doing streaming video get higher bandwidth than, say, people who have a blog. So, and Netflix is able to afford it, so they get it. It's sort of like you're going to ship something UPS. Now, it's either going to take 7 days to get there by ground, or it's going to get there overnight. The difference, of course, is price. If I send the box 7 days, it costs me $8. If I send it overnight, it's $40. So you say, well, that's not fair. $40 is too high, and I want that fast speed. So we're going to limit the cost to $8. Well, guess what's going to go away? Overnight service. Everybody gets the 7-day service because that's what you get for $8. Same thing with the internet. Yeah, you could get a 1 gig connection. Sure. If you needed it and you could afford it and it was available in your area, you could get it. Most people don't need a 1 gig connection. 50 to 100 megabytes is plenty for everything. I have 52 megabytes here, and that's what we run this program on. Costs a little bit of money. It costs about $140 a month, but hey, that's what's available and that's what we get. So all this was going to go away because Obama was president and the chair was a Democrat. Of course, what happened was one of the Republicans, whose name was Ajit Pai, informed us what was in the new FCC regulations without actually informing us what was in the regulations. He walked a very fine line. And what happened was the public was now aware and empowered, and they said, wait a minute, net neutrality doesn't mean net neutrality. It means exactly the opposite. And so they fought it, and it was defeated. It was never put into full regulations, even though the Democrats controlled the FCC. So when Trump got in, Ajit Pai then became the Fed chair. Or not the Fed chair, but the FCC chair. And so everything was going fine, except that the tech giants now, we're not really talking about airwaves per se, but we still are talking about Federal Communications Commission jurisdiction. The tech giants, namely Google and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, they started acting like publishers. They said, look, we're going to regulate what content goes on our platforms. If you're talking about things that we don't think are right, and by we, I mean whatever small group of globalists they have in their organization. For instance, my LinkedIn account. I had about 2,700 people in my LinkedIn account. I've had LinkedIn, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years, a long time. Lots of information out there, lots. And I posted an article that was written by a lung doctor about prophylactics with COVID and how wearing a mask might not be the best advice for everybody because some people have very tender lungs. And when you wear a mask, sometimes it can cause lung infections, face infections, things like that. And I had pictures, and it was a good article. I posted that article, and my LinkedIn account was extinguished. It was put out. I don't have a LinkedIn account now. I can't get it back. I've tried to appeal it 10 times. They say, nope. You're harmful to the community. You're out. So I'm not on LinkedIn anymore. I hate it because I don't think I was violating any rules. I didn't write the article. I just posted it. So anyway, I'm out. I've also had my Twitter account canceled, my Facebook account canceled, and it's frustrating because, we're a small voice here and we're just trying to get the truth out. And truth is a matter of, let's call it faculties. Let's not call it argument, but because people argue all the time, but we argue to get to a point of negotiation or get to a point of settlement or get to a point of education. We arouse the faculties of those people so that they can make logical decisions. In any case, what happened was the FCC got in between the people and the tech giants. And this Section 230 really became a point of debate. Are you going to be a publisher or are you going to be a platform? If you're going to be a platform, unless it's indecent, like child porn or what could be considered pornography, if it's indecent, then you can't put it out there. I mean, there's a limit. There are places for that kind of publication, and it's out there, and you can go to it, and it's perfectly legal. It's free speech, but not on a public platform, not in a public mall, not in public where little kids can see it and where innocent people can see it that don't want to see it. They want to be able to walk down the mall without being flashed in the middle of the mall, by the sunglasses booth. I'm just saying. That's what the FCC is there for. And the FCC chickened out. FCC said, we can't go against them. They're too big. They're too powerful. And you saw what happened. The committees and the Senate and the House hauled him in there, hauled little tiny Zuckerberg in there and put him on his high chair and asked him questions and brought in, stare at goats head of Twitter and asked him questions. But, as soon as it got to the hard questions, they had to kind of back off. Why? Well, they're not all that big and frightening, but what they could do is very frightening. When you have a senator that's asking a question of a man who could simply put them in Facebook jail for 30 days, and all of a sudden you're not a senator anymore. You can't run your campaign. You can't reach your 80 million followers on Twitter because you don't exist on Twitter anymore. You can't post your ad on Facebook, your campaign ad asking for donations, because you're not on Facebook anymore. You can't publish your posts or your speeches or your rallies on YouTube because you're not on YouTube anymore. Nobody knows you exist. You have social media managers who cannot manage because you don't exist. They have erased you from the social media. That's why congressmen and senators didn't ask hard questions. That's why they didn't subpoena anybody. That's why they didn't put people in jail. That's why they didn't change the laws or write regulations to rein in these people. Because as soon as they did, their campaign's over. They're off. They're out of office. They'll be primaried, and somebody that nobody knows today will be the most well-known household name in 30 days if they want it to be. When you have a platform that has 1.2 billion people scrolling through it at any given moment, it's the biggest venue the earth has ever known. Can you reach those people? No, you can't. You want people to know about the book you bought, and so you put it on Facebook. How many people see it? 6. That's it. Maybe 2 or 3 retweets, 1 or 2 shares. That's it. Why? Because you're throttled back. They don't let your presence be out there. You know what makes things go viral? Neither do I. Neither does anybody. So the 2 Republican commissioners of the FCC, Brendan Carr and Nathan Symington, have blasted attempts by the House Democrats to have cable carriers drop conservative networks, not hosts, not like Hannity or Tucker or Judge Janine or, well, I guess they got rid of Lou Dobbs, didn't they? One at a time, I suppose. Get the old guy first. No, we're talking about networks. We're talking about Fox News, Newsmax, OAN. We're talking about doing away with them. Now, Representatives Anna Eshoo, she's a Democrat from California, and Jerry McNerney, he's a Democrat from California, both senior Democrats on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Those are very powerful. Sent letters to numerous cable, satellite, and video streaming companies asking them means you really don't have a choice here. Asking them if they plan to continue carrying the conservative networks. The Democrats accuse the conservative networks of spreading misinformation. Like they would know. A common line of attack that's used by leftists and their allies in the global syndicate against conservatives. The letter followed weeks of lobbying from CNN for cable networks to censor their competitors in conservative media. Republicans on the FCC blasted Democrat politicians for supporting the campaign to suppress dissenting media. I quote, "By writing letters to the cable providers and other regulated entities that carry these news media outlets, the Democrats are sending a message that is as clear as it is troubling. These regulated entities will pay a price if the targeted newsrooms do not conform." See, they were asking, but they're going to pay a price if you don't. To Democrats' preferred political narratives, this is a chilling transgression of the free speech rights that every media outlet in this country enjoys, including America Free Radio. In its own statement, Commissioner Symington concurred with Carr's comments. I quote, "It is worrying that members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee have found it appropriate or necessary to apply the overboard and vague label of misinformation to any media reportage that calls into question their preferred political narratives, the Politburo, and have sought to intimidate into silence those who would distribute on their platforms disfavored points of view." So far, cable carriers and broadcast networks have shown no indication of succumbing to Democrat demands, but $1.6 trillion in COVID relief funding can be very influential. Will there be a backfire? Well, maybe. You know, we think back on this program and others when Alex Jones was taken down. And you remember what that was about, right? The Columbine shooting. All he did was raise some questions, legitimate questions, like who were the kids that were killed? Where were they born? When were their funerals? Was school even open that day? Is that a building that's even used? Were people going to school there? Are there crisis actors that were involved in this? These are decent questions any investigator would ask. But of course, Alex Jones of InfoWars was kicked off a series of tech platforms in a clearly coordinated decision. Did anybody care? No. I did, because Alex Jones used to be on our network, another network that I was on. He left and formed InfoWars and went his own way. He is an entertainer. He is a outspoken person, and if you want to listen to him, fine. If you don't, turn him off, fine. It's either way is fine. But nobody cared that they took him off. And I said, be careful, because if they can do it to Alex Jones, they can do it to anybody. Given that people like connected Senator Chris Murphy were saying the ouster of Jones was just a good first step, it seemed obvious the tactic was not going to be confined to just a few loudmouth actors. But corporate media critics insisted the precedent would not be applied more broadly. But it was. CNN's Oliver Darcy said, I don't think we're going to be seeing big tech take any action against Fox News anytime soon. But maybe later. Darcy was wrong. Just a few years later, calls to ban Fox are not only common, they're intensifying. With media voices from Brian Seltzer on CNN to MSNBC analyst Anand Girhardis, to former Media Matters critic Eric Boehlert, to Washington Post communist Max Boot and Margaret Sullivan. They're all on board with it. The movement crested this week with a letter from those Democrats I was telling you about, Eshoo and McNerney, written to the CEOs of the cable providers like Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, Cox, and Dish. They demanded to know if those providers are planning to continue carrying Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN beyond any contract renewal date, and if so, why in God's name would you do that? The news comes in advance of today's House Energy and Commerce Committee hearing on traditional media's role in promoting disinformation and extremism. Wow. I don't know. The sequence of events is ominous, to be sure, because a similar match set of hearings and interrogations back in 2017, when senators like, Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, right, at a judiciary committee, demanded that platforms like Google and Facebook come up with a mission statement to prevent, quote unquote, the foment of discord. Discord. Not allowed to have discord. Not with Democrats. Accelerated the content moderation movement that now sees those same platforms regularly act as de facto political censors. Sequences like this, government requests of speech reduction, made to companies subject to federal regulation, I'm building the case here, make the content moderation decisions of private firms a serious First Amendment issue. Censorship advocates may think this is a purely private affair, in which the only speech rights that matter are those of companies like Twitter and Google, but any honest person should be able to see this for what it is. Press freedoms have been in steep decline for a long time. Barack Obama's record of targeting whistleblowers, and in some cases journalists themselves, go back and talk about Dan Rosen with Fox. You remember he published the article, and Obama wanted to know his source, and Dan told him to pound sand, and Obama said, well, you're going to jail until you tell me. And Fox had to get their lawyers out and protect Dan. But the next time I saw Dan on TV, he looked like a whipped pup. He knew he was going to prison for a long time. He never said another word out of line. He didn't last much longer in the news business. And of course, we have others being prosecuted under the Espionage Act. Let's see, I can think of one name right off the bat. How about Julian Assange? Julian Assange never did nothing. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't shoot anybody. Damn sure didn't lie about anybody. All he did was publish the truth. That's it. Now, that truth was not good for some people. We saw journalists getting killed by a American warship on their gun cameras. We saw about money laundering. We saw about human trafficking. We saw about, 87,000 people massacred. All of that. I mean, yeah, it hurt people's feelings that news came out. But Julian Assange didn't write that news. It was given to him. Whistleblowers brought him information because they knew he would publish it. And he wouldn't edit anything. The only thing that Julian Assange did was vet the material to make sure that it was so-and-so's email, that it was this report, that it actually was that archive. And that he would do. And then he would publish it. But where is he now? He's in prison. And he's waiting to be extradited, to be hung, I'm sure. Being prosecuted under the Espionage Act. We progressed to a particularly dangerous new stage in recent years with oligopolistic tech companies urged on by global syndicate politicians engaging in anti-competitive agreements, which is called fascism, to suppress political voices on both the left and the right. How does this happen? How does fascism happen? Well, when a corporation becomes large and very wealthy, they often can, A, use their money to buy politicians, and then the politicians do their bidding because that's where their campaign cash is coming from. We see that a lot. The other way is that they can actually take their executives, their founders, and put them inside the government agency. It would be like Twitter putting their executives on the FCC. It would be like Monsanto putting their executives on into the FDA or into the Department of the Interior. Oh, wait a minute. They've already done that. It would be like taking a Raytheon lobbyist and making him a Secretary of Defense. Oh, no, they did that too. Yes, they did that too. You know, that's what it's like. You take these big corporate leaders and you put them inside the agency, and then they work inside that agency to prevent anyone from competing against them. That's called engaging in anti-competitive agreements. That's fascism. That's what Mussolini did. And that's what FDR did. FDR and Mussolini were big pen pals. They were big buddies. And FDR made no bones about establishing a fascist government. He enjoyed it. He liked it. He liked corporate government. He was the New York governor. He liked making agreements like that. And, of course, John Nance Garner, his vice president, didn't like it, and neither did a lot of other Republicans. They tried to get rid of him. They hoped that in 1940, after FDR had served his 2 terms, that he would be out. But that's not what happened at all. He didn't even run in the Chicago Convention in 1940, and yet he won 86% of the delegates anyway, because of a little shenanigans. You have to read about it in the book, in the Birth trilogy, you'll read about it. The point is that what we're witnessing here is fascism, big, thick roots wrapping around the base columns of our government. Those gunning for the removal of Fox, Newsmax, OANN, these other news outlets, are clearly not interested in getting there by way of the law, because winning is everything. They want to take advantage of the hyper concentration of power among the media distributors. The tech giants like Apple and Amazon that can zap a massively successful app like Parler overnight, just deplatform it. It has no place to go. Now it's up and running now, but it's still, mortally wounded, and it'll be a while before it comes back up. And the confederation of cable carriers like Comcast, AT&T, Time Warner, Verizon that hold dominion over the broadcast networks. That's where it's going. And so this battle that we're fighting right now for the core of America is with this, what I call the global media empire. And right now, the Democrats chair the FCC that can write the regulations that could literally take us and all other programs like America Free Radio off the air. You won't hear this anymore. You have to find another way. Well, you have to go over to the house, just meet in the backyard or whatever. That's the way it was done. That's the way the underground works. You have underground meetings, and you do it face to face. What is that, Eric? I have to go back up and get more on the subject there. And Hollow Earth Guy says Alex Jones has been proven right about so much. It's not so much that Alex Jones was proven right. Alex Jones is an entertainer. He is an extreme person. He does that to not only arouse your faculties, but to be so far out there that people question his sanity. That's the whole reason he does it. I've been interviewed by Alex Jones. I found him to be a very decent, very intelligent person. He was nice to me. I was nice to him. We had a great interview. It was years ago. Alex Jones does a fine job. What Alex Jones did is he asked questions. And when people tried to answer the questions, the issue is that it opened their eyes, and sometimes they didn't want to see what was there. It was sort of like Abraham Lincoln was out on his porch one day with one of his colonels, and they were talking. And the colonel was telling him about Sherman, how Sherman was going to march through the South, and he was going to burn the fields, and he was going to salt the wells, and he was going to rape, pillage, and basically burn everything to the ground. And did he approve of that? And Lincoln, hang on a second, we'll take a quick 3-minute break, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. More America Free Radio right after this.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive, but that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and there were giants in earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
I want to thank everybody for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the one place where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
All right, let's show them what we got here.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Okay, we're back. Glad you could join us and stay with us. By the way, there's about, 80-something of you out there listening on various platforms. Make sure to hit that like button. I don't care what platform you're on, hit that like button. And by the way, those people that are listening on D Live right now, I think what I'm going to do right now before we get started is, well, if it's not going to let me. Oh, yes, it will. First, I have to log in. Let me log in really quick to D Live. Okay, we're logged into D Live now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give away some lemons because I just feel like it. I think it's good. By the way, Sydney, glad you followed us today. I'm glad you're out there. We got people listening on D Live, and so what I'm going to do is load up here. Let's see, that's 50. Let's do 100. Yeah, why not? We'll give away 154 lemons. Okay, let's just do that right now since we're in the mood. We're going to distribute right now. So all those people that are listening on D Live, the algorithm is running and thinking right now, and 5 of you are going to be selected to receive some lemons in about 20 seconds. And then we're going to continue our discussion and get deeper into the subject. And thank you so much, all those people that are out there. Somebody's out there in, let's see, what is it? Where are you? Something. Oh, Hugadarn. Hi, Dr. Brooks. I've been a fan of yours since 2008. Many are called, but few are chosen. I live on the Isle of Wight in southern England. My island is known as the Sacred Isle. It's true, but let me correct one thing. And that is, many are called, but few choose. Many are called, but few choose. We're the ones that do the choosing. All right, let's see. Who do we have? Oh, my goodness, look who won. James Bright, 46.1, Rehab, 26.9, Falcon 80th, 19.7, Vonnie Kinsey, 15.9, and Michael, 1973, 13.4 lemons. That's real money. Now it's in your accounts. So sooner or later, you're going to be able to link that to your bank account and draw that money out and pay off your car. Which, by the way, today is payoff day for me. I paid off my truck today. Such a good feeling. No more truck payment. How about that? Now I'm debt free again. So the credit bureau is going to beat my ass for not being in debt. So what? Like I care. All right, let's see. She says, or he says, I don't know if Hugarn is a guy or a girl, but on YouTube says, I thought I got that wrong. LOL. That's okay. That's okay. It's in the book. And I know if you've been following me since 2008, you've read a few books. And by the way, if you have bought books on Amazon, either UK or American, and you don't have an autograph in them, I can fix that. All you need is one of these. The present from the future. You see this autograph right here? This is a genuine, official, stick-in signature card. It's adhesive backed. You just peel that off, stick it in your book, and boom, you have an autographed copy, even though you bought it from Amazon. And these are free. I'll just pay for the postage, and I will send you as many as you want. Not like 100, but if you bought like 5 books, I'll send you 5 of them so you can autograph all your books. Just like that. Doesn't matter where you are. I think I can get these mailed out around the country, around the world. So Virtual Joe is having his problems, okay? He's a slobbering, a doddering, staring, old, blank-faced fool. And the question is, who is going to answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning? It ain't going to be Virtual Joe. He runs out of steam at about 4 in the afternoon. Remember in January when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked the Pentagon to limit still then President Trump's ability to use the nuclear weapons during his last week in office? Well, now a cadre of House Democrats, spearheaded by former CIA Director Leon Panetta's son, Jimmy, he's a Democrat from California. Seems like that's who we're all mentioning tonight. He was part of this effort to limit Trump's ability to use the nuclear codes. They've now asked President Biden, Virtual Joe, to relinquish sole authority to use the nuclear weapons, since the military is obligated to carry out the order if they assess it is legal under the laws of war, should Virtual Joe or a future president choose to launch nukes without consulting advisors. Democrats are recommending that Virtual Joe modify existing procedures to require additional officials in the line of presidential succession, starting with the vice president and the Speaker of the House, of course, because Nancy Pelosi is the most powerful woman in the world. Make no mistake about it. If you don't believe me, just ask her. Anyway, neither of these people can be removed by the president if they disagree to concur with a launch order. Also recommended is requiring that launch orders be validated by the Secretary of Defense. You know who that guy is, right? The communist that they just put in as Secretary of Defense. They had to waive a special rule that doesn't allow former military. They have to be out of the military for a certain number of years before they can be Secretary of Defense, because there's a conflict of interest there, because once you become a general, it's a very political position in the Pentagon, and they want to have you be thoroughly a civilian before you're put into that position. But they waived the rules for this guy. He's okay. We're going to put him in there. And the Senate said, sure, that's fine. Go ahead and put him in. So now he's in there. But now they want the Secretary of Defense to be in on the approval board. Okay? Also recommended the Joint Chiefs of Staff and maybe the Secretary of State. Yeah, that's a good idea too. So here's how a U.S. nuclear strike works. First of all, you need to understand how we would be hit. I was in the Air Force. I've been briefed on this, and I can share it with you Maybe it's classified, but you know what? Nothing's classified on this program, so I'm going to share it with you anyway. The way a strike would take place against the United States is first, there would be an EMP weapon. That's an electromagnetic pulse weapon. Could happen at the surface, in a Chevy van in the middle of a big city. It could happen at altitude in a passenger plane or a cargo plane, or it could happen in orbit with an orbiting satellite. Once it got into position, the EMP blast would go off, and what happens is this electromagnetic pulse puts millions of volts in the form of energetic neutrons and electrons and gamma rays into the atmosphere. And this electricity is looking for some place to go. It's looking for a way to ground itself out. So what's it looking for? It's looking for wires to use as antennas. So, as you know, in just about every neighborhood in the country, I'm not talking about your neighborhood because you have underground utilities, but the lines coming to your neighborhood are overhead. Okay? Those are antennas. You think these electrons care about what wire it is or what voltage is on it? No, they don't. They're looking for a way to ground. So they jump on the wire and they head to the substation, which is, well, it's right over there. Right over there. You can't see it, but if I turn the camera, maybe look out the window, you can see it. It's right over there. The substation has a auto tap transformer. Now, normally this auto tap transformer takes the 161,000 volts that's coming in from the nuclear power plant that's over there, and they step it down. 13.8, 14.4, something like that. They step it down to about between 13,800 volts and 14,400 volts. That's still a lot of volts, but it steps it down quite a bit. And then that goes out over the power lines to the transformers that are in the neighborhoods. So these step it down to 440 volts. And the 440 volts goes charging down the street. And then you have the big, the gray transformers that are up on the pole, or the green pad mount transformers that are in your yard. That steps it down to 220. And that 220 comes into your house on two different legs, 110 on one and 110 on the other. The difference between them, because they're two phases, is 220. That's what runs your stove and your heat pump and all that stuff. And the 110 is what runs your light and your computers and all that stuff. That's how it's stepped down. But see, all that stuff is now an antenna, and it's all fair game. And so when these millions of volts go blasting out there, pretty close to the speed of light, they look for these wires, and they start heading to the substation. But they're not going step down. They're going step up. They're going backwards through those transformers. So they're not getting stepped down from 161,000 volts to 13.8. No. They're getting stepped up from 13.8 to 161,000 volts. So that million volts going into that transformer is now going out the other side at 10 million volts. And voltage is potential. It doesn't matter if it's low or high amperage. And this is going to be significant, because the oil that's inside those transformers, that's insulating the stainless steel plates that make up the coils inside these transformers, that oil is only good for a certain number of volts. It has all the air pulled out of it in a big vacuum chamber before it's sealed up. But the reason that air is pulled out is so you don't have microscopic arcs taking place between those plates. But that arcing's set up for a couple 100,000 volts, not 10 million volts. So what happens is these transformers explode internally, or they could even rupture. They build up so much pressure they could rupture if the pulse is powerful enough. But the point is, now you have destroyed the insulation of this transformer. It's $1 million transformer, and there are no spares. So your substation goes down. And your computer, if it's plugged in, and every other electrical device that you have that has a wire in it. And if your electronics are not hardened in your car or your phone or your tablet or your clock, it all goes down too. Now, this EMP will probably take place in the wee hours of the morning when everyone's asleep. And nobody's going to know anything about it. because the phones aren't going to work. The cell towers aren't going to work. No cable networks are going to work. Nothing is going to work for minutes and minutes and maybe hours. But let's just say, for argument's sake, it knocks out every circuit for 30 minutes. Not permanent damage, just 30 minutes. It happens in the wee hours of the morning. Nobody knows. No alarms go off. Nobody gets a phone call. Nothing. You're asleep. The only thing you're going to know about it is you're going to wake up late for work the next morning. That's it, if you're within the range of this EMP. Now, in the 30 minutes that our eyes have been poked out and we have no ability to see anything, satellites are blank. Everything that was in range of that blast is blank. Submarines sitting off the coast launch short-range missiles at command and control areas. Washington, D.C., Pensacola, Florida, Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, all these places that have command and control. And cruise missiles are right behind it. So once those missiles hit their targets, which takes about 6 minutes, cruise missiles take off and they're heading 12 to 1,500 miles inline. Now that's going to take about 2 hours for them to get in there. They're traveling at about 600 miles an hour, 500 miles an hour. It's going to take them about 2 hours. But see, command and control's already been knocked out. So no one's going to know. There's not going to be any radar. The only warning you're going to get is if somebody hears one go by in the middle of the night, they're going to say, wow, that jet was flying really low. Doesn't have any lights on it. It's flying at about 100 feet off the ground, so you're only going to see it for maybe a quarter of a second, and it's going to be gone. So when it reaches its target, these are nuclear warheads. Now you have serious damage that takes out our ability to strike back. So that's it. In 30 minutes, it's all done. And within 2 hours, the ability to strike back is done. So how does the U.S. strike back? Well, we've always had an ability, two of them. One is in the air, which we have sorties in the air at all time. It's a fail-safe. We did it throughout the Cold War. I'm sure we're still doing it now. There are still B-52s. There are still B-1s, B-2s that are in the air with nuclear weapons, and they're flying all the time. Just for this reason. So if we get hit, they have orders that they break open and they hit back. The second is nuclear-powered submarines. No one knows where they are. The Ohio-class subs are so quiet, no one knows where they are. They're on secret missions. They go underwater and they stay underwater for 2 or 3 months at a time. They don't come up for nothing. They have their orders. If they don't get the signals that they're supposed to get when they send a buoy up or they come to the surface and make their satellite communication, they don't get their update, they go into fail-safe mode and they carry out their mission. We call that mutually assured destruction. It has worked for a long time, since the early 50s, in keeping the world safe. But not anymore. Too many nuclear players and too many players that can do what are called false flags. We'll attack and we'll make it look like Russia. We'll attack and we'll make it look like Saudi Arabia. We'll make it look like Venezuela. But it'll be somebody else. And we won't know because we have our eyes poked out. So here's the way we strike back. The president considers nuclear strike, and they have the sole authority to use nuclear weapons. Consultation call or a conference with military civilian advisors, and this can last as long as the president wishes. Could last a mere 30 seconds if the U.S. is under imminent attack and a counterstrike is necessary. So that's 1 minute or less. President's decision to launch. If the president orders a launch, the Pentagon has to comply. The order is verified. Senior officer in the Pentagon's war room must authenticate that the person ordering the strike is actually Virtual Joe. But we're not actually sure that Biden is who he says he is, are we? Are you? You know, one question I thought the news media should ask one day? I'd ask it. Excuse me. Yes, Brooks from America Review Radio. Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I have one question. Who did your mask? That's a really good mask. I just would like to know, where do you get your mask? How would he answer that? I'm not wearing a mask? Oh, really? Well, you mind if I pull on that nose or pull on that ear? Because You're a little loose right here on the neck. See, you might want to just tug that down a little bit because it's not fitting too well. But it's good. It's really good. I'd like to know who does it. So we got to be sure that it's Virtual Joe. They read a 2-letter challenging code, which is then retrieved by the president on the biscuit. 2 or 3 minutes goes by. The order goes out. A launch order is prepared by the war room. It's a message containing the plan, time of launch, authentication codes, as well as the codes to unlock missiles before firing. It is broadcast to each worldwide command and directly to the launch crews, provided the communications networks work. If the EMP has been in that area, that whole area of communication might be down. You might not be able to reach the missiles in North Dakota. You might not be able to reach the missiles in Colorado. You might not be able to reach the submarines or the airplanes. See? So the launch crews then take over. Crews open locked safe to get sealed authentication systems. It's called the SAS. Codes prepared by the National Security Administration. And remember, we have a lot of leaks in that organization. If you'll recall, Susan Rice was in there and regularly told lies, regularly, whoppers of lies. So they can't be believed either. They compare the SAS codes in the launch order with the ones in the safes. Now, there's another suggestion in this letter that they wrote. Is a requirement that a congressional declaration of war and specific authorization be required before any nuclear first strike could be conducted, and the creation of a permanent active council of congressional leaders that would regularly participate in deliberations with the executive branch on vital national security issues and mandate some portion of the council be consulted before the first use of nuclear weapons. Well, you can see where that's going, right? In other words, if you have a president of one party and this council that they're talking about putting together of another party, you could be stopped from protecting the United States. Steps that would add critical minutes to a competent president's ability to act quickly, which is why the president has this authority in the first place. The reason the president has this authority is because it acts as a deterrent to other nations, because they know he doesn't have to check with anybody. If he looks outside and he sees a mushroom cloud 40 miles away, he pushes the button. Just like that. That's what stops other nations from going to war with us. Because one powerful speaking president, like President Trump, who says, if you do this, I'm going to unleash fire on you like the world has never seen before. That's the only authority that's needed. Nobody else in the chain of command. He says shoot, they shoot. That's what keeps other nations in line. That's the whole reason that the executive branch has that power. So, anyway, that's the situation. They don't trust Virtual Joe. If he's not pumped up with Prevagen, they don't think he would be coherent enough to get a sentence out, especially under that kind of stress. If he's in an Ambien-induced stupor at 4 o'clock in the morning, he's not going to be in the shape. That's why I'm saying Virtual Joe's going to be gone by 2022. Somebody younger, somebody more puppet-like is going to be put in place. By the way, somebody said today, oh, I know it was Wayne Allen Root. Yeah. I already told that to you, where President Obama, former President Obama, was behind everything. And I said, no. He's a boob. He can't say anything without a teleprompter. It's not him. It's a global syndicate. All right, let's back up a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the made-for-TV riot. This is really something. What is it, Hollowworth guy? If they use an EMP, it will be gamma ray enhanced with shielding around nuke to increase the gamma yield 10 to 100 times more. You're talking about neutron enrichment, and it can be done, but that's not the purpose of an EMP. The EMP is specifically designed to put a very powerful pulse of electrons, energetic frequencies out into the atmosphere. The Koreans detonated a 250 kiloton weapon. Now, it was underneath a mountain, and we don't really know what the EMP results of that were because it was underground. These things have to be air burst. They have to be burst in the air, or at least at the surface, in order to get these electrons into the atmosphere. So we're not really talking about a destructive blast. We're not talking about something that blows buildings down and rolls school buses across the football field. We're not talking about a blast like that. We're talking about a specific kind of blast. If you're going to enhance the blast, and this is done in the nanoseconds after the gamma radiation is released, because a gamma radiation is very compressive in its form, and in fact it's the only compressive form that can be used to cause fusion. It takes an atom bomb to blow off a fusion bomb, because you got to have that kind of frequency in order to get the fusion to occur. And then you pour extra neutrons in. You pour tritium and you pour deuterium into it to provide extra neutrons so that the chain reaction happens even more powerfully. Otherwise, you get what's called a fizzle, or a series of fizzles. You want to have plenty of high energy neutrons in there bouncing around in order to make the chain reaction more efficient, sort of like a catalyst to make the reaction take place to its full extent. And that's what you're talking about, enrichment. It's a very, very complex process. Only 9 countries in the world know how to do this. India, Pakistan, China, the United States, Germany. I mean, there are some countries just don't know how to do it. It's limited for that reason. Very complex, very hard to do. But if you can do it, it's devastating. A fusion bomb is unbelievably devastating. 5 megatons would wipe any city off the face of the earth in a matter of minutes. Well, clap on, clap off. That's very good. It says, why has there been no State of the Union address? The State of the Union address takes place annually, and it hasn't been a year. Thank God. So that's why there hasn't been one. EMP that strong might even short out military hardened equipment. No, it wouldn't. We've blown off about 2,600 of these beggars. Yeah, a lot. Most of them underground or under the water or out in space. But each time we blow these off, we have racks of equipment that we test. We build equipment, frequency generators, radios, all kinds of stuff. We harden it, we put it in the area of the blast, and we set off the blast just to see if the hardening works. Jets are hardened, tanks are hardened. Military equipment is set up to protect itself. It uses a thing called the Faraday effect, or a Faraday cage around it, so that when these high energy electrons attack, they are skinned around the outside, sort of like a Tesla coil or a Van de Graaff generator. If you ever get a chance, go to the Boston Museum of Science and go see the lightning show in the basement. They have the world's largest Van de Graaff generator there, and it's still working. And they make these gigantic lightning bolts in there that just scare the crap out of you, the first few of them that go off. But they have a guy in a bird cage running the control panel, and it gets struck all the time, but he doesn't get hurt. That's because of this cage that's around him. So that hardening has to be grounded in a certain way in order to get the electrons around the circuit that you want to protect and to ground. Hollow Earth guy says, oh, I know that, Brooks. It will increase the electric yield per square meter 10 to 100 times. Oh, yeah, okay. I get that, yes. Yeah. But it's not necessarily the blast itself. It's more the frequency that they're trying to accomplish. And it doesn't take all that much material to make this happen. It just needs to be efficient. It needs to have enough weight to it 250 kilotons is a heck of a blast. The Koreans, it wasn't the fact that they could blow it off. It was the fact that it was so small. The Koreans figured out how to make it small. Instead of being so big an airplane can't pick it up, it's small enough that a van could drive it around. Freedom Bound, that's a good point. He says apparently we could harden the grid fairly fast and fairly cheap if we had some focus. There are different levels of hardening. One of the ways to take out a substation, we've done it in warfare lots of times, is to fly overhead and drop metal shavings and like metal noodles. And these come flickering down through the air, and what they do is they short out the bus bars and destroy the substation that way. So some substations now, you will see, have a kind of netting over the top of them, or a fence of some kind. The reason they do that is to catch those metal strips that might fall from overhead. That's one level. The other is you'll go around and you'll see these little short lightning rods. They're very short. They're maybe about this tall. And they look like a spike sticking up. And they're all over the top of the substation. That's part of the hardening as well. The other thing you have to worry about is that these transformers, they have watt meters on them. And because they want to monitor the power all the time and they want to monitor the phases. And the boards that step this down, usually it's like 0 to 1 volt or 4 to 20 milliamps or 0 to 10 volts. That's the process signal that goes out. And that's gathered up by the computer. And it's able to take that signal and proportionally figure out how much power the transformer is working on or how much it's monitoring. That board needs to be hardened. Because if that board goes out, you can no longer control or monitor the substation or the switchgear for that matter. So that board needs to be hardened, and I don't know if that's done. The board's actually kind of delicate. It used to be about this size, but they're much smaller than that now. And it's kind of crazy that, the 0 to 1 volt, that's the whole range, or 0 to 5 volts, 0 to 10 volts, or what's called 4 to 20 milliamps on a 24-volt circuit. I think that's the most reliable myself and the easiest to harden. All right, let's talk a little bit about, and the Chinese are burying their wires for that very reason. Yeah, that's exactly right. But see, the Chinese are doing something that we are not doing. We have not built a coal-fired power plant in this country in a long time. It's like verboten because people think coal is so dirty because it's black. Sorry, I used to run 3 coal and gas-fired boilers, so I know exactly what I'm talking about here. Coal can be made very clean, especially a fluidized coal. It's where it's pulverized into a very fine powder. Instead of chunked out onto a chain conveyor where it's burned and then raises the temperature to get the water up to 1,200 degrees or 1,200 psi that blows on the turbine and turns the generator. Instead of that, it fluidizes it. So you don't end up with an ash bed. You end up with a kind of spray of dry coal. And it instantly burns, and it's much easier to control the temperature that way. If you've ever run a boiler, you know what I'm talking about. You got to have a certain layer of ash on the chain, or it will make your chain overheat. The fresh coal goes on top of the ash, and that's how you're able to kind of control the temperature by the speed of the chain conveyor and the amount of coal that you put on it and the amount of water that you're taking off the boiler. You don't want to take too much off because then the boiler can flash to steam, and then you do what's called lift the relief valves, which blows a bunch of steam out, and everybody gets kind of worried about it. But you don't want to lift the relief valves. That's a big no-no. You want to stay within your pressure limits and keep your temperature and your pressure and the level in your boiler where it's supposed to be. Let's talk a little bit about the made-for-TV ride. We got about half an hour. The mother of the Capitol Police officer, Brian Sicknick, you remember the guy that supposedly was hit in the head with a fire extinguisher and he died of his injuries? That's not what happened. The mother came out and said her son may have suffered a fatal stroke during the January 6th riot, but was not hit in the head by a Trump supporter wielding a fire extinguisher, as the mainstream outlets began reporting almost immediately after Sicknick's death. Now, Sicknick is early 50s. I'm going to say 51 years old. He obviously in pretty good shape, but I can tell you that if you have a stroke at that age, you're probably going to die. And the reason is that you have not lived long enough to build blood vessels around the blocked blood vessels in your brain or around your heart. A 74, 75, 78-year-old who has a stroke can probably live through it, even multiple mini strokes. You could take drugs and you can keep your blood pressure under check and you can pick up another 10 or 15 years. But Sicknick is, at the age where if you have an issue like this, it's probably going to be fatal. A heart attack at 50, 55 years old, you're going to drop like a sack of potatoes and you're not going to get up. 74 years old, you'll have a little pain, you'll go down, maybe they can revive you because your heart has had time to build new blood vessels around the blockage. Not so when you're young. But a journalist, Glenn Greenwald, said this, and I quote, "Sicknick's death was the only example the media had of the pro-Trump mob deliberately killing anybody," close quote, as the 4 other people who died that day, including Ashley Babbitt, who was killed by a police officer, David Bailey, and 3 other Trump supporters who died, respectively, from a stroke, a heart attack, and from being accidentally crushed by the crowd. And now it appears Sicknick's own family believes it was a stroke. He wasn't hit on the head, no. We think he had a stroke, but we don't know anything for sure. That was his 74-year-old mother. The lack of detail on Sicknick's death didn't stop mainstream media outlets from lying about it to promote the narrative that Trump supporters were involved in the, quote, deadly insurrection. On January 8th, the New York Times reported that rioters had hit Sicknick in the head with a fire extinguisher while citing 2 law enforcement officers. The newspaper ultimately issued a correction for the report on February 11th, in a separate piece, by the way, asserting, quote, investigators have found little evidence to back up the attack with the fire extinguisher as the cause of death, the official said. Instead, they increasingly suspect that a factor was Officer Sicknick being sprayed in the face by some sort of irritant like mace or bear spray. On January 10th, when the video emerged of a rioter hurling a fire extinguisher toward law enforcement on the steps of the Capitol. I don't know why I'm getting that echo. Not be getting an echo. But I am. So it's probably coming through Skype. That's fine. If you don't hear it, I hear it. That's fine. It just can mess with your ears a little bit. 4 days later, on January 14th, retired Philadelphia firefighter Robert Sanford, who's 55, was arrested as the rioter in the video. His charges included assault on a police officer, disorderly conduct, civil disorder, and unlawful entry of the Capitol. The fire extinguisher he hurled was reported by AP to have bounced off the heads of 3 officers, 2 of whom were wearing helmets. None of the charges related to Officer Sicknick, and yet the narrative continued to run unchecked, with not one leader acknowledging the ongoing investigation or the complete absence of any certainty amid the melee of misreporting. The only death that we have on film that is absolutely a cold-blooded, premeditated murder was the shooting of Ashley Babbitt. And that was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. And we expect Officer Bailey to be prosecuted for that, shooting an unarmed person. Let's see. According to the brother, Ken Sicknick, Brian texted him after he was injured, making no reference to a fire extinguisher. He texted me last night and said, I got pepper sprayed twice, and he was in good shape. Apparently, he collapsed in the Capitol, and they resuscitated him using CPR. Sicknick was later placed on a ventilator, passing away on January 7th, 1 day later, before his family could make it to the hospital to say their goodbyes. So that's what happened. And that's why they have coined these phrases, and now they're trying to make all Trump supporters out to be insurrectionists because of that narrative. Eric says, I have a buffalo hat like that guy. Yeah, I've met him before. He's been around at the various conventions, and he's harmless. He's just a harmless guy. He's a self-made shaman. He just kind of goes around to the different conferences. He was an informer for the FBI for a while. I don't even know what that was about or why he was at our conference if he was one. But I think he's pretty much harmless. And nothing's going to happen to that guy. He might spend a little time in jail, but I don't think anything's going to happen to him. He didn't do anything but wander around and look weird. All right, SpaceX is switching out one of the 3 Raptor engines on its Starship serial number 10 prototype. That's sitting on the launch pad. They're probably going to push the high-altitude test flight back. You know that serial number 8 and serial number 9 both splatted. The engine swap decision was made yesterday, shortly after serial number 10 ignited its engines for the first time during a static fire test. One of the engines is suspect, so we're swapping it out, said Elon Musk. The static fire was part of the serial number 10's prep work for roughly the 6-mile, that's a 10-kilometer test, hop into the Texas skies, which could have happened as early as the 25th, but I think it's going to be pushed back. Serial number 10 is the 3rd Starship prototype to fly so high. 8 and 9, as I said, splatted. They flew fine. They came back fine, but they just landed a little bit fast and exploded. It was roasted marshmallows time. SpaceX is developing Starship to get people and cargo to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. The system consists of 2 reusable elements, a 165-foot tall spacecraft called Starship, and a giant rocket, which is called the Super Heavy. I have pictures of this in my book, Asteroid Mining, The Future of Energy. Final Starship will have 6 Raptors, and Super Heavy will be powered by 30 of the engines. SpaceX wants a Starship prototype to make an orbital test sometime this year, and Musk recently said that he thinks the final vehicle will be operational by 2023. I think it's aggressive. I wish him luck. I'd love to go to work for the company, and I think I would help them get there, to tell you the truth. Okay. Fascism, as I said, is when corporations infiltrate government, and then they use the power of government to crush competition. Earlier this month, Twitter announced it had taken action against 500 accounts. And, of course, it's taken out a lot more than that. That it said had violated the platform's rules. The announcement came after the Indian government ordered the platform to remove more than 1,100 posts and accounts that it claims were spreading misinformation regarding widespread protests by farmers against new agricultural laws. The move, a response to orders from India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, follows an earlier request to limit the audiences of 250 accounts that use hashtags related to the term farmer genocide. Twitter explained its recent actions in February 10th blog post, noting that over the course of the last 10 days, Twitter has been served with several separate blocking orders by the Ministry of Electronics and Information. Out of these, 2 were emergency blocking orders that we temporarily compiled, but with subsequently restored access to the content in a manner that we believe was consistent with Indian law. A lot of that's going on in this country too, only it is not so much being driven by government as being driven by the tech people from the tech giants that are inside government. And we see a lot of that with Virtual Joe. Virtual Joe has filled his cabinet with the longest list of fascists and activists and left-wingers that the world has ever seen. And it's going to affect all of us. It's going to affect how you get information. It's going to affect how you reach one another. Baba Susie, so many satellites seen the other night. Having Rocket Man Brooks on any team is win-win. I agree with that. You know, quality engineering is vital in any industry. Right now, I'm building home appliances with a Fortune 800 company that's been around for 120 years. Doesn't matter how big the company is or how long they've been in business. Everybody needs the help of a good quality engineer. Normally, I work with Fortune 500. Sometimes I work with small companies if I'm in between gigs. And I think it would be very cool to work with the space program. I might go down to Boca Chica, Texas, and see if I can walk in with my resume and see what'll happen. What do you think? Think it would be fun? I might have to stop doing the radio program, though. I'd have to weigh that. I don't know. Big decision there. Also, I saw a very good post by Dinesh D'Souza, and it went along with something that I had said a number of years ago. In 1996, I wrote a paper calling for the end of institutionalized education. I saw the liberal takeover and the use of tenure as armor plating to prevent anyone from attacking their communist agenda. Oh, it was alive and well, let me tell you. The internet had finally gotten fast enough for people to use with cable modems. All the suppliers that I used to have to call or fax proposals to through Thomas Register. Thomas Register was a 24-volume set of these big, thick green books, and they were in alphabetical order, kind of like the encyclopedia. And what they would do is, like, say you wanted a bearing, or you wanted a gasket, or you wanted a lens, or a case of some kind. You could look up the product in the Thomas Registers, and it would show all the American manufacturers, their addresses, their fax numbers, and their phone numbers. That's all we had to go by in those days. And the Thomas Register came out every year, and you could upgrade it, but most people didn't. They just bought one and went with it for about 5 years. But in 1996, the internet was coming out, and in 97, it started getting fast because of cable modems. And what was happening is those companies that were in the Thomas Register that made stuff, 5,000 of them a day were getting websites. We didn't even know what websites were. We didn't know what a browser was. There was no, any of that. Internet was dial-up. It was for sending emails. It was not for contacting companies like that. People didn't have websites. People didn't know what a browser was. Really, there was no such thing as Google. There was barely Yahoo. We had Alta Vista, and we had AOL, and I don't know, a couple others, but they were small, and it was hard to find anything. But it was starting to get fast, and it was starting to get plentiful. So, as I said, 5,000 of them a day were getting websites. And within a couple of years, every piece of technology in history was available to anybody with the drive to go search for it. Knowledge was far more powerful than any diploma. Of course, insurance companies and governments protected the colleges and universities because they required diplomas for jobs like engineer or HR professional. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was really ridiculous because when you got out of school, you didn't know nothing. You just had the basics. Then you had to learn everything. Then this higher education push, which was called Education Edge, came out of the Clinton administration, making homeschooling practically illegal. I'm so glad Hillary did not succeed in ending homeschooling. Now, in 2021, it looks like common sense is finally catching up. We have finally learned that institutionalized education is not essential. That is one good thing the Made-for-TV virus taught us. Dinesh D'Souza is proposing an alternative online university system with $5,000 yearly tuition. saying it could crush liberals over higher education. The famed producer and author told John Solomon on his podcast this weekend that the new college system could be part of the conservatives' effort to defeat cancel culture and censorship by building their own educational and entertainment infrastructures. With regard to digital media and media generally, I mean, we have to build our own platform. So I'm very much in the camp that says that at least in the short term, we need to build an alternative educational infrastructure, an alternative entertainment infrastructure. We need our own comedians. We need the whole thing. We need our own America inside of America. Why not? Why not? He said a top-notch online education system was key to the whole infrastructure. We basically need one online university that has assembled together the top 100 teachers and scholars in the world that will offer a Harvard-level education for $5,000 a year. If you did that, you would make all of higher education obsolete overnight. I mean, the universities wouldn't go away, but it was kind of like when the iPhone first came out. Suddenly, all other phones were obsolete. We can do that for education. We can do that for media. You just have to make the right moves. I think that the money is there and the will exists to do it. It's just that our side is very erratic, and there hasn't been the creativity on the supply side to create these things. I mean, just think, for example, of the amount of creativity it took for Roger Ailes to go to Rupert Murdoch and just say, listen, you know, all these cable channels are fighting for half the country. Geez, why don't we start one? Make it a real thing. We'll offer a rival point of view. We'll take the other half of the country. It's so simple. I mean, for decades before that, you know, all we did, our side, was, you know, complain about media, document the media bias. Oh, it's also biased. We're going to give the bias award to, you know, who cares? Do your own thing. Build your own, you know, mousetrap. And that's really what Roger Ailes did. And that's been my model for the world of documentaries and even feature films in Hollywood. That should be the model for education. That should be the model for everything. There have been various alternative education institutions established in recent years to try and change the tide of higher education. And some of these include places like, you know, Patriot Academy and Wall Builders, which teach students about America's founding, focus more on the cultural aspect of education, cheaper, faster, and more skill-oriented educational institutions that Place University Ventures are investing in Pioneer the way for more effective education that helps prepare students for the workplace. You know, welding and electronics and wood shop and auto shop and computer repair and networking, all this kind of stuff can be taught online. You don't have to go to a university that's going to charge you $50,000 a semester. Co-founder and managing director of University Ventures, Ryan Craig, has said that employers are looking for job candidates with technical skills. Right now, you know, I'm 65 years old, and my contract is coming to an end in about 3 weeks, and I'm looking for another contract. So I'm talking to big companies. Well, my resume is pretty fabulous, but there are some things, some skills like Python programming or some of these change-driven programs that are out there, these new and exciting programs, CRM programs, customer relations management programs. You really have to be slick with these things. And if you have them on your resume, then you can enhance your skill level. Now, to take a Python course is about, I don't know, $200. And you can get a certificate in Python. Python is a consolidation software that a lot of companies are asking for now. Some of them are asking for 4 years experience with it because they write everything exclusively with Python now. So I'm thinking of taking the course, upgrade my skills, make myself more marketable if I'm going to continue working. I'm just 65 years old. I probably get another 40 years in me. Do I want to work, or do I want to sit around and write books and draw my Social Security check and not be a force to be reckoned with? What do you think the answer to that is? Exactly. One of these last mile training providers, called Always Hired, is an immersive tech sales boot camp for recent graduates who want to gain sales skills and get a job in the tech industry. You know, a lot of the world is driven by sales, but you would be so surprised at how many salesmen I know that have never actually had a formal sales course. They just know how to talk to people. But if you take a formal sales course, you know how to close, you know how to negotiate, you know how to recognize a concern and which concerns should be dealt with and which ones shouldn't. You can close a lot more deals. You know how to end sentences with a question that draws your person in. You need to take skills. I used to take classes from Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and Og Mandino and Tony Robbins. I mean, these are great teachers. You go to their seminars and you learn stuff and you incorporate that into your life and you become a better communicator because of it. I just come here on the radio and communicate with you. And that's what I do every Monday and every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And I'm so glad that you guys come out and hear me and listen to me. And I appreciate you so much. If you weren't here, I wouldn't be here. I can tell you that. This is a hobby. I enjoy it. I've been doing. Next month, we enter into our 17th year on the air. This is America Free Radio. This is X Squared Radio specifically as a program. My name is Brooks Agnew. Saying peace, Earth Explorers. Now you go and do, and make sure to look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. Right now, tonight, we're coming to you through the Revolution Radio Network on freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported network in America. Please take the time, go to freedomslips.com, and set up a regular donation. $1, $2, $3, $4 a month. You know, if a couple 100,000 of you did that, we could change the world. We would not have to worry about anything. NPR's already taken money out of your check every day and given it to themselves to run propaganda around the world. You'll be helping a big network by going to freedomslips.com and filling out a donation. Hope you liked tonight's program. We'll see you Sunday night at 8 o'clock.